What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another Pro Guides video. I'm Kangas, and today I'm analyzing some Akshan gameplay at the top of the Korean ladder. Akshan is statistically still doing pretty bad overall, but the player that we're looking at today has already pretty much mastered the champ and is absolutely tearing it up. Win or lose, he pops off just about every game, and we're going to try to break down exactly how he does so well on a champ that most people are completely flopping on. But before we dive in, I want to mention that learning from VODs is a great resource, but it can only help so much. If you're really serious about climbing in solo queue, you need to head over to ProGuides.com. Our top tier coaches are available around the clock and always ready to help you learn everything that you need to dominate the ladder. We're even offering courses from talented pros like Aphromoo, Xmithie, and CoreJJ right now, and these courses can seriously elevate your game, so if you're interested, go check it out. But getting into the video, let's start things off with a bit of pre-game analysis. Like I said already, Akshan is overall very bad statistically. He has a very unconventional way of being played if you're actually using him correctly, and most people that play him don't even understand that. He has a huge focus on roaming and playing for ganks at pretty much all stages of the game. The number one mistake that you see from people that try to play him is that they just plant themselves in lane and farm. But this is incorrect. You want to use your W, which essentially gives you permanent stealth, to cheese as much as you can. Even out of lane phase, you don't want to immediately show yourself in a side lane and soak up farm like most champs. Instead, you want to wait for the enemy to come to farm the lane and then swoop in and try and take him down. Let's also go over his full build before we get into the VOD itself. First up for items, against an AP champion like in this game, he starts off Doran's Blade and then goes into Wit's End first, Merc Treads, and then Kraken Slayer. This particular game ends before we can even see the next item, but in general, he'll go for Guinsoo's, the Collector, and Guardian Angel next. He often does some changes to the build, but this is the most standard one. When not going against an AP champ, he'll often just build like a normal marksman, going for any of the 380 carry mythics first, then Collector, Infinity Edge, Mortal Reminder, and Lord Doms. For runes, he always does the same setup. Press the attack, Presence of Mind, Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Shield Bash, and Bone Plating, with the stat rune being attack speed, adaptive force, and either armor or magic resistance. Alright, so with the table setting out of the way, let's get into the game itself. So at 1 minute 40 seconds, his team opts for a red buff invade against the enemy, so he makes it to the lane just a tad late. As soon as he's there, he immediately goes to town on Galio, trading as aggressively as possible. The biggest advantage that you have as Akshan versus a melee champion is your ability to bully them hard early. Aside from comboing the double auto with Q, most of the time you'll notice that he uses the movement speed bonus from canceling the second auto to chase down his opponent for more damage in the trades. Now, he knows there's basically no chance that Lee comes to gank this early on, and even if he does, he'd easily be able to swing out safely. With that in mind, he's free to do what he wants with the wave and play as aggro as he likes against Galio. Here, he's standing between Galio and the minions to be as much of a bully as possible. But it is worth noting that this is a pretty matchup-specific tactic for laning. Since Akshan can easily win trades against Galio, is ranged, and has decent wave clear, there's never a point where he should struggle to shove the wave if he wants to. As a result, he doesn't have to worry about poor wave management leading to a freeze for Galio. But in other lanes, even as lane bullies, you have to be careful about this. For example, even a hard-winning matchup like Fizz versus TF can be turned into a miserable experience if TF is allowed to pull the wave and freeze it under his tower. Next up, since his team invaded the enemy red buff and the enemy team knows it, he assumes that Lee Sin is just vertical jungling. As a result, he's leaning hard towards bot side. In higher elo, vertical jungling is very common after an invade happens. Don't always expect players to react accordingly in lower ranks. Now, seeing his team set up for a super early dive, he backs up a few steps to TP to help. Backing up ensures that Galio can't stop him from finishing the channel, which is a small but crucial thing to keep in mind. Anyway, he ends up not being needed for the dive since Kate is dead before he even finishes the channel, and to make matters worse, he has a pretty embarrassing death here. Hey, even the best players in Korea make mistakes too, we're all human after all. But awkwardly walking back to lane following whatever that was, he first walks with Diana to make sure that Lee Sin isn't on her red buff. Once he knows that she's safe, it's back to mid lane. With Kate farming the wave instead of Galio, he can't exactly bully his current target due to her range advantage, so he just chills and goes for last hits for now. He wants to hold this wave as close to tower as possible, because as soon as Galio is back, he wants to get right back to bullying. And that is exactly what happens. Pretty much right as he's in range, he's auto-attacking Galio. He uses his E not to go in on Galio, but to try and bait Galio to use his engage. If Galio had fallen for it and dashed in, he would have been punished pretty hard. And now crucially, at this point, notice how differently he's playing the lane. He's still going for aggressive trades on Galio, but he's not just shoving in waves and standing between Galio and the minions. Early game, he knew exactly where Lee Sin was and was not at risk at dying to ganks. Now that it's a few minutes in, Lee could gank from anywhere, and there's always the risk of a support roam too. If Galio was to dash in, flash taunt, and that was followed up by a Lee Sin, Morgana, or even both, you would almost certainly die. So he plays accordingly, trading as much as he can onto Galio, but letting his opponent shove the wave to him so that he can farm it safely. And now with Galio out of lane for a reset and his Diana doing Dragon, he wants to push in the wave so that he can be ready to move. Shoving in this tank wave would either keep Galio from rotating or force him to give up a cannon minion, which most people are at least a bit reluctant to do. But before he can even push the wave in, Lee shows up, pathing to gank him, but ends up skirmishing with Diana instead. He's able to use a wide swing from his E to swoop in and help Diana take Lee Sin down. After that little scuttle, he goes for a reset, and seeing Galio near bot lane, he paths down as well. It looks like the enemy team is setting up for a dive, and he's ready to turn it around. Galio combos him from the bush, but that doesn't stop him. He takes a Thresh Lantern into the fight, swinging in past the Galio ult for Kate. His second E may look like a mistake at first since he swings really wide on Morgana, but she's not his current target. Lee Sin is on Varus with no minions or allies around to block it, so he's free to hit an ult on him. He then comes back into the fight for Galio. With his Tarzan-like maneuvering, he picks up a triple kill for himself in a 3v4 just 7 minutes into the game. But the fun is not over yet. Most people want to go for a reset after picking up that many kills, but with, like I mentioned earlier, roaming and ganking play heavily into Akshan's playstyle, and he knows there's potential for more gold here. He sticks around and dives Morgana. With Akshan's E, dives are pretty easy since the reset allows you to get in and then back out with ease. Then right after Morgana, Caitlyn's up to bat, and by up to bat I mean that she also gets killed under her tower. So in the past minute or so, he's been able to pick up 5 kills for his team, with 4 of those going to him. He's built up his own lead massively while also putting the enemy bot lane very far behind. Now finally, after resetting, he sees that Rakan is covering mid, so he goes top to catch the big wave that Kennen is pushing in. Remember, as we've covered in previous videos, moving to cover lanes when other teammates are in yours is a crucial skill to make sure that you stay both up in gold and XP. In this particular game, the swap is actually permanent, and he'll be playing top for the rest of lane phase. Thresh actually comes with him to gank the Kennen, and with Lee Sin showing up to make it a 2v2, Akshan easily picks up a double kill for himself. When you're fighting as Akshan, you need to be pretty wary about your positioning. Thresh helps out by dragging Lee up with his hook, and Akshan strafes down to ensure that his bullets hit Kennen. As soon as Kennen dies, he then swings into Lee Sin for the damage. Remember, Akshan's E isn't just about mobility. You're maxing it, and it does the majority of your damage too. So when you get a reset, you almost always want to use it immediately again for max damage output. So now knowing that Kennen has no flash or ult, he uses his W to stealth all the way between the enemy top lane towers. He waits around for a bit, and once Kennen walks through, he just jumps him for another easy kill. Again, this is something I touched on in the pre-game analysis. You actually want to go for cheesy ganks as much as you can with your W. Farming the enemy team between their towers can be a bit risky, but it is an insanely tilting way to die, so you're getting not only the gold, but also mentally winning the game. After picking up that free kill, he runs top, swings into lane, and goes to reset for his Wit's End. Now I talked earlier about how OP the Wit's End spike is for Akshan, and you will see it firsthand here. Even without landing very many E shots, he almost 100 to 0's Kennen. If he had landed a few more shots with the Z, or minions weren't there to block his ult, it would have been an easy takedown. But Kennen sticks around and goes for Honey Fruit, as Akshan has no intention of letting him come back to farm the wave as it crashes. He wards the enemy tri-bush, prepped to jump in on his target, and Kennen drops a ward and walks in, and as soon as he's in vision, Akshan swings in, bringing him back to very low HP again. He chases him up through the tower, but takes a couple of shots in the process, and at this point, he could go for the risky kill, but he decides not to greed. If he face checks Kennen and dies, he's given up a lot of momentum. And when you're already playing a snowbally assassin type champion that wants to exert a ton of map pressure, you really do not want to give up your momentum. So he makes the big boy decision to shove in the wave instead. Heals up as he does, then waits in his W to see if Kennen actually went back to base. After confirming Kennen did recall, he farms another wave and takes the plate. Again, this is another instance of a seemingly small decision that can have a pretty big impact. Less disciplined players may chase that Kennen into Alcove and try to scoop up the kill, but by taking the safer route, he just got as much gold from minions in the tower plate as you would get from a kill anyway, with absolutely zero risk. The lesson here is that a one trade doesn't always have to result in a kill. Forcing someone back to base may not be quite as satisfying as padding your KDA, but it will win you more games if you play with a bit of restraint. Now, Rakan wants to help Akshan continue to bully Kennen, so he sets up in the enemy tri-bush. But remember, Akshan should have seen Kennen ward this earlier. The enemy team is able to rotate, and after a somewhat sloppy skirmish, turns into a very favorable 1-for-2 trade for themselves. Now, this fight actually could have worked out well, as after killing Lee, Akshan flashes over to go for Morg. But he misses Izzy entirely. Had he used it on the wall next to Morg, he would have been able to kill her and then use it to reset to escape from Kennen. But mechanical error or not, you don't want to go for risky fights like this when you're super ahead and you're sitting on a big pile of gold. It's always just safer to go for the reset and fight on your own bigger item spike. Beating 1,000 gold shutdown is an easy way to throw a game, though in this particular instance the gap is so big that it's not nearly enough to turn things around. Still, make sure that you're building good habits. Upon respawning, he initially starts walking to bottom lane to match Galio, but Rakan goes to do it instead. He's happy with that since, again, the goal as Akshan is to constantly roam and gank targets. It's a lot easier to move around the map from mid lane rather than having to cross the entire map from the corner of a side lane. He goes mid, jumps on Kate, almost kills her with just a quick bursty combo, leaving her to be finished off by Varus. So with Kate dead, his whole team comes to take mid tower, but instead of sticking around with them, he now heads bot for Galio. This is a tactic that you can apply on a lot of champions that have an emphasis on playing for picks. If your team is shoving down a lane, the enemy team is usually going to assume that your whole team is there, you included, so they'll be less on guard about being ganked. As a result, you'll more easily be able to catch people in side lanes or rotating through the jungle. In this instance, he plays the gank on Galio a bit too cautiously, so he misses out on the kill. Galio definitely doesn't have 100-0 power here, but maybe he's afraid Lee Sin is nearby, though it is pretty unlikely for the enemy jungler to shadow a split pusher, specifically a splitting Galio, as his team is about to be at the enemy mid-inner tower. Next up here, after Galio blast cones out, he goes back for the wave, shoving it all the way to the bot tower. He wants to knock down this turret since less structures equal a more open map, which means an easier time ganking enemy players as they try to farm side waves. Now, a bit after accomplishing that, he's back to prowling for kills. He and Rakan chase Galio into the enemy red jungle, but even with Rakan's ult, the chase is kind of fruitless. After the chase, he notices Kennen farming in bot lane, so he runs down to make a move. At first, he makes it seem like he's just there for the farm, swinging in with E to clear the wave. But after he kills the minions, he stealths and hangs out for quite a while, waiting to see if Kennen stuck around for the next wave. Now, I want you to take note of how patient he is. He doesn't break stealth until Kennen shows mid, where his team is applying pressure. So with no targets to gank, he instead soaks up farm, shoves the wave all the way to the inner tower, and the whole time his team is fighting in mid lane, but Akshan isn't the type of champion where you always want to group up and fight 5v5s. Now, like we see here, what he often does on Akshan is let a fight happen, and then try to move in afterwards to pick off targets. After a team fight, you'll usually have some players that can reset back to base, with a couple of others either moving out to establish vision, farm camps, or clear waves. Akshan's W is perfect for picking off these targets that are now alone. After a fight, usually one of the survivors is bound to be a scoundrel. Since W not only gives you permanent camouflage, but also a trail straight to the target, you'll often be able to use it to hunt down your target, collecting the bonus gold, and instantly putting your teammate back on the map. Early game, a quicker revive may mean a bit of extra tempo, but later on it can make a huge difference, like having enough of a numbers advantage to take a free Baron. Anyway, what we see here isn't quite as perfect of a scenario. He makes it all the way up to where Lee and Morgana are in the river, and he cautiously waits at the jungle entrance, but neither target actually recalls. Rakan comes over to make a play with him, but at this point it's been so long since the last fight that the entire enemy team is back on the map and in the area. The rest of his team is doing Dragon, so he and Rakan are left with a 2v4, but it's not a complete loss as he's able to turn it into a 1-for-1, making a stylish retreat as he guns down Morgana in the process. After clearing a few minions, he goes back for his Kraken Slayer, which is arguably the biggest spike for you as Akshan, because now you can easily assassinate 100-0 most squishy targets that you find with almost zero room for counterplay. So after this reset, he sees Kennen fighting his Varus, TPs in case of a full-on team fight breaking out, but nothing ends up happening with that, so he sticks around in the stealth to see if any other targets show up on the map. Again, nothing happens, so he goes to start Rift for his team to ensure that they can grab it before it despawns. He runs to catch a top wave, shoving it all the way in, and then the game reaches a pretty anticlimactic end as he's pushing in the wave. His team kills most of the enemy players, which then leads to them throwing up the white flag. But let's be honest, if you were on their receiving end, you probably would too. And that about wraps up our analysis for some high elo Korean Akshan gameplay. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to sub so you never miss out on our other content and you're always up to date on our meta guides. If you have any other high elo players you want us to take a look at, make sure to let us know in the comments down below. We're always on the lookout, but it helps to get community feedback too. That's it for today, so best of luck on the Rift, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one.